Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. There's only one story tonight, and it's about Kashmir's tragedy. The occupied land that was illegally annexed by India on 5th August last year. Tonight marks the first year of an act that violates all norms. Legal, because it violates the UN Security Council resolutions as well as bilateral arrangements between India and Pakistan, and the compact India made with occupied Kashmir. Democratic, because one stroke of the pen, the RSS-sponsored BJP government of India desecrated not just its own constitution, but also took away whatever little remained of Kashmiri freedoms. Much before the world got to know what a lockdown means, Kashmiris were locked down as a consequence of the 5th August decision. Ironically, even the Quislings, who kept alive the charade of democracy in occupied Kashmir, in collaboration with successive repressive Indian governments, were arrested and detained. Since then, thousands of Kashmiri activists, writers, political workers remain in prisons. Already one of the world's most militarized zones, India has pushed in thousands of more security forces in the region. Laws are being changed to further India's settler colonial project. Genocide Watch has issued alerts on the situation in Indian-occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. When the Holocaust happened, the world said never again. When Rwanda was torn apart, the world said never again. When Srebrenica happened, the world said never again. And yet, this is exactly what Kashmir is witnessing. Kashmir Reading Room's yearly report is out and details the situation. For anyone interested in more detail, we would strongly recommend reading that report. On that note, let's begin our discussion, but we'll play it differently. I'll place only one question before my guests. Tell the world what you think is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We have with us Gowhar Geelani, a Kashmiri journalist and author, and with him, Dr. Claude, Rakistis analyst with over 20 years of experience serving in the Australian public sector, including in the Departments of Defense, Foreign Affairs, and Trade. Thank you to both Dr. Rakistis and Mr. Geelani. Mr. Geelani, since you are on the ground, my question, tell the world what is happening. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ejaz, for inviting me to your show. First of all, it's not the story of only one last year. The story has been one of tragedy for the last 73 years. But yes, you rightly in your intro described the scene that has gone more uglier, and the pattern has grown more ugly since last 1 year. Right now, we are under curfew, strict restrictions, and August 5 is the day when the Narendra Modi-led Bharatiya Janata Party government also went to perform a puja, which is a ritual, Hindu ritual, at the site of disputed Babri Masjid in Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh. So the message to the Indian Muslims is that this is the day when it's a Hindu conquest over Muslims in mainland India. And to the people of Kashmir, to the Muslim majority Kashmir, the message is that this was the day when we illegally annexed Kashmir. So this is that Hindutva politics that is happening, since Narendra Modi government took control in May 2016. And what is happening here? If I tell you there has been the absence of politics for the last 1 year, as you rightly referred to unionist politics as Quislings. And even they, three former chief ministers were detained and put under illegal arrest for more than 6-7 months, and one of them is still under house arrest for now it's been more than a year. And as far as there has been leaderlessness, if I may call it so. And then what has happened to the there's suspension of civil liberties. All those voices who chose to speak or who chose to write, either they landed in jails or they were arrested, summoned, questioned at various police stations. And media has been gagged so much that all our local journalists, local newspapers in particular, have been silenced, completely silenced. There were no editorials and op-eds for 7 months. And when they started writing op-eds and editorials, they were on different situations in faraway Congo, but nothing substantial on Kashmir. So, if I talk about politics and the suspension of civil liberties, media freedom, and the biggest fear in Kashmir right now is of demographic change. And these fairs are so original and so rare that more than 400,000 people have already got the new domicile when this new domicile law was introduced in Kashmir. And this another law which enables the Indian Army to describe any civilian area as strategic and then build permanent structures around those areas. So these are the, it's one of my friends wrote that this battle for existence in Kashmir's 5,000-year-long history, this is the most critical battle for survival, battle for existence. That's all I'm going to say to the world.
Absolutely, I'm very happy that you talked about the last 73 years. Let me go a step further and remind the world that even before 14th August 1947, Kashmiris were under the oppressive rule of Dogra Maharaja Hari Singh. As a matter of fact, on 13 July 1931, a day that Kashmiris on both sides of the artificial line of control, as well as the Kashmiri diaspora around the world, celebrate as the Kashmir Martyrs' Day. This was the day on which 25 Kashmiris were martyred by the Dogra rulers' security forces outside Srinagar jail. A Kashmiri Pandit, who's a scholar, politician, writer, Premnath Bazaz, wrote a book, Inside Kashmir, which was published in 1941, that details the events that led to that massacre. That day was Kashmir's Jallianwala Bagh. Also, thank you for reminding the world that Narendra Modi and RSS Parichik laid the foundation of the Ram Mandir at the site of Babri Mosque today. This is a reflection of the heartlessness with which this particular Hindutva government is approaching the minorities in India mainland and also in the occupied land of Kashmir. Let me go to Dr. Rakistis. Dr. Rakistis, tell us what you think is happening in Kashmir.
Thank you again, Mr. Haider. Thank you very much for having me on the program again. It's always a pleasure to meet up with you. Look, the situation, this is an anniversary that no one really wants to celebrate. There's absolutely nothing to celebrate at all. And I fully agree with Mr. Geelani, what he just said. He's obviously knows more than me about what's happening on the ground. From here in Kerala, thousands of miles away, and I still follow it as closely as possible. The only thing I can say is that the whole situation is just simply appalling. It's been appalling for a whole year. The people in Kashmir, and particularly in the valley, have been under a double lockdown now, thanks to the COVID-19. And that just has made life utterly miserable for everyone. And even though officially, according to Prime Minister Modi, what he did on 5th of August last year was all to bring peace and development in the region. We all knew this was a pack of lies. But now we obviously know that it just only brought more violence, more misery, and more uncertainty to the people of Kashmir. And every aspect of Kashmir society has been affected by what's happened in the last year, every aspect, whether it's the economy, which has led to massive unemployment, especially amongst the youth, the fact that there's no internet, or there's 2G, but effectively no internet, which of course makes it that much more difficult for health workers and doctors to try to assist people who've been hit with the coronavirus. Situations like the schools have effectively been closed for the last year, except for maybe 15 days. Political leaders, 400 political leaders are still locked up, including, of course, another 13,000 people are held in detention without even being tried. So the list goes on. And again, the domicile certificates have been given to non-Kashmiris, to Hindus, so that they can basically change the demographics of Kashmir. All that is just simply extremely bad news. But the sad part of it all is the fact that the world Israeli has turned a complete blind eye on this one. They simply don't want to hear about it. They don't want to read about it. And this is what makes life so much more difficult for Kashmiris. And again, and I can talk about it later if you want to hear about it, I think the only way forward, I think, and I can elaborate about that, is really to have some sort of referendum in all of Kashmir. But I can talk about that later. But at this point, the whole situation is utterly appalling and completely unacceptable for a country that considers itself the largest democracy in the world, as they keep reminding the world.
Absolutely. We talk about the referendum part of it also, Dr. Rakistis, but today's program is essentially focused on my attempt to get all my guests to tell the world on their own what it is that is happening in Kashmir. And I think you've done a remarkable job of that. And I must also commend you on a very beautiful green tie that you're wearing. And I believe you're also wearing cufflinks that that carry the Pakistan map. But thank you so much, Dr. Claude Rakistis, for speaking with us. Let me go back to Mr. Geelani before we also pull in Mirza Saaib Beg. Mr. Geelani, the most important question is, why should the world care? And when we talk about, as I said in my opening, Genocide Watch has issued alerts. There's a change of demography, the fact that now the Indian security forces, the occupation forces, can actually grab land at will. They do not require anyone's permission, no objection certificate required. This is a surefire recipe for creating Bantustans in occupied Kashmir. This is the settler colonial project, exactly on the lines, in fact, even faster paced than what the Israelis have done in Palestinian lands.
From the Kashmiri perspective, all I can say is that most of the Kashmiris feel that time is running out for them. When we talk about the world opinion and international community and their, long history of, morality with regards to human rights violations. So there is this, the silence that the other, worthy guests talked about. Unfortunately, the economic relations between, different nation states takes a precedence over human rights situation. Countries like Germany want to sell Volkswagen to India. France wants to sell Rafale to India. And so on and so forth. I mean, the Kashmir story gets lost in this. Now, but I want to focus on more important things is, like, for example, when the BJP took this decision last year on the 5th of August, the argument was that we are going to bring more development. So on the development front, I want to inform you that the Kashmir Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the biggest influential trade bodies in Kashmir, in its report says that Kashmir economy has lost 40,000 crores in one last year, and 400,000 or 4 lakh, for South Asian audiences, 4 lakh youngsters, boys and girls, have lost jobs. And then thousands of entrepreneurs have lost their investments. Tourism is in tatters, tourism industry, hospitality industry, hoteliers, people dealing with the transport. So that is the developmental part. Then it was, talked about that we will bring peace. So there's a report by Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society. 350 people have been killed since last 1 year. And this includes 36 civilians which the JKCCS says that they were killed their killing was extrajudicial killing. So that is the peace part. And then it was that, everything will be hunky-dory. But the event that happened on August 5th last year was a huge geopolitical event, because the status quo was altered of a land, of a geographical area which has 15 million population. It was a huge geopolitical event, and this part of the land is surrounded by 3 nuclear powers. And if you have read the Chinese Foreign Ministry statement today, they have termed the annexation as illegal and unlawful.
Absolutely, I'm very happy. Mr. Geelani, that you've raised this point, because this is exactly what the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on 6th August. Within 24 hours of this illegal decision by the Hindutva Indian government. This is something that absolutely needs to be placed on the record. But thank you so much, Mr. Geelani, for giving us your views on this very dark day. I am now joined by Mirza Saaib Beg, a Kashmiri lawyer currently at the University of Oxford. As a matter of fact, Mr. Beg is right now, as he speaks with us, as part of a protest in front of the Indian High Commission. Mr. Beg, I have a very simple question tonight from my guests. What would you like to tell the world about what's happening in occupied and illegally annexed Jammu and Kashmir?
I want to draw attention. In fact, the speaker before me, he spoke about reports that have come out in Kashmir, which cover various aspects of what has happened in this last 1 year. I want to draw attention to a similar report which has come out from the Kashmir Reading Room, which compiles all aspects of changes, legal, political, economic, social, militarization, various aspects of the Kashmir movement, various narratives from diverse identities in Kashmir. So this report brings all of them together, and I'd urge all your viewers to access this on jklpp.org and read the narratives of Kashmiris from themselves.
And I'm so happy that you talked about, because before you joined us, this is in my opening, I referred to this, and as a matter of fact, it's called Disintegration at Gunpoint. It covers the period from August 2019 to 2020. It has contributions from different regions of Jammu and Kashmir and India. It talks about political developments, law and policy, economy, culture and minorities, conflict and society, media, letters, statements and reports by Kashmir Reading Room and KRR report to the UN also. So thank you once again for mentioning this report, because that corroborates what I said. And I also said in my opening that this report is available, and I strongly recommend that it should be read. Please go on.
So I think what needs to be said over here is that I've been asked at various occasions, what now? What do we do now? What has to happen is that we have to intellectualize, we have to fight, we have to take this argument forward at every level. We have to first understand what is being done to us so we can use the right language and the right tools to work against it. And we have to challenge our oppressors at every stage, because we are being targeted from legal mechanisms as well as extrajudicial mechanisms. The narrative that is being used by the Indian government right now, it doesn't meet the ground reality in terms of development, in terms of women's rights, in terms of even Kashmiri Pandits, because Kashmiri Pandits themselves right now are opposing what is being done. In fact, in this report that you mentioned, there is an article, an interview of a Kashmiri Pandit also, who says that this amendment does not benefit us in any way. It doesn't benefit them also. The report also has an article by a lawyer, a Kashmiri lawyer from Kargil, who talks about what is the situation of Ladakh post-bifurcation. Because as your viewers will know, Jammu and Kashmir has been bifurcated into 2 union territories by the government of India. So that article addresses post-bifurcation, the disarray and the lack of management, lack of vision, even in Ladakh. Some people in Ladakh were happy about the bifurcation, but in a few days, they realized that their hard-fought rights have been taken away from them. They don't even have a legislature anymore, so they have no representation as well.
And they have been protesting also.
And then, of course, and they've been protesting as well. And then we come to the economic aspect on how Kashmiris have been disempowered. The report includes an interview of the KCCI, the Kashmir Chamber of Commerce, the chairman, Mr. Ashik Hussain. He has given an interview where he details the job losses. He details the loss of 40,000 crore, which is nearly about $5 billion US dollars that Kashmir has lost. So what development are they talking about? And Kashmiris are not on the roads asking for development. We are not on the roads asking for jobs. Kashmiris are on the roads asking for a political solution. The reason that there has been a lack of investment in Kashmir is because there is political turmoil. What the Modi government has done last year has exacerbated the political turmoil. It is not resolving it. So no sensible businessman, no sensible business is really interested in investing in a war zone. The only people who are interested are the ones who know that they will be able to grab natural resources of Kashmir, which has also been addressed in another article in the report, which talks about mining in Kashmir and how 100% of the mining tenders in Srinagar have been given to Indians, to non-Kashmiris, in absence of a legal right to access our natural resources without our consent. So this is what has to be addressed. And on the basis of this report, we want to engage, people want to engage further argumentation on what is going on in Kashmir. So the report addresses almost all aspects: constitutional law, international law. It addresses what happened in the United Nations and what is going on right now. And finally, we're trying to build a consensus between conscientious Indians who believe that what has happened in Kashmir is illegal, and they have to also stand up in solidarity with Kashmiris. Because as Kashmiris, it is easy for our voices to get disregarded. It is easy for India to suppress our voices. But Indians who are a part of Indian society, and especially Indians who have the privilege of not being Muslim, they can vocalize and stand in solidarity and use their privilege in the right manner.
Very eloquently put, and I think that's a great phrase, who have the privilege of not being Muslims. Just one more thing, Mr. Beg, with reference to the settler colonial project. If you recall, then India's Consul General in New York, one Sandeep Chakravarti, spoke with the Indian diaspora in New York and actually very clearly referred to the Israeli settler colonial project and said, if they can do it, why can we not do this?
Well, that really shows where India is getting its inspiration from. But it needs to be said that the struggle in the Middle East requires its own resistance and its own solutions, and the struggle in Kashmir requires its own resistance and its own solutions. Because Palestinians are not even given any kind of citizenship. They're not given any kind of citizen rights. Whereas in Kashmir, we did have a form of citizenship through our state subject laws, our permanent residence laws, which India is now has completely amended, and it's gone now. So there are parallels between what is happening in what Israel is doing over there and what India is doing over here. But we need to understand that we have to be inspired by each other's struggles and learn from each other's struggles, because the systems of oppression are similar, but the solutions may always not be the same. In Kashmir, the solution is one which bends towards an arc of justice and freedom for the people of Kashmir. And in Palestine also, it has to bend towards justice. So we do see certain parallels between what is happening. But in Kashmir, right now, immediately, it will not be the same structure of settler colonialism which you see in Palestine, because common Indians are not planning to move to Kashmir. What is happening right now is that soldiers, ex-army men, even non-Indian soldiers, the Gorkhas, who are Nepali soldiers, are moving into Kashmir and being given domicile rights. So right now, it is only ex-army men who are actually moving in, and people who are at the bottom of India's the social hierarchy, the social statuses in India, who are being incentivized with jobs, who are being incentivized with small benefits to move into a war zone. Because no sensible person is going to move into a war zone with their families, with their children. So this is a very small section that's moving right now. But over the next few years, we may see Kashmiri Muslims being evicted out of their properties. But there are no plans of doing that as of now. As of now, Kashmiri Pandits are asking for separate settlements for them, which will be guarded by the military presence in Kashmir.
Okay. So much. That was Mirza Saaib Beg speaking with us. As I said earlier, he was speaking on the sidelines of a protest that is taking place in front of the Indian High Commission. We shall take a short break and return to continue our discussion of the plight of Indian illegally occupied and annexed Kashmir. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. We continue with the tragedy of Kashmir, a land illegally occupied and annexed by a Hindutva government whose ideologues take their inspiration from Nazi writings and actions and seek to create a Hindu Rashtra by purging minorities, especially Muslims. Changing the demography of the land in occupied Kashmir is their opening hand. As I said in my opening before the break, Kashmir is a test case for the conscience of the world. The Indian government is embarked on a grand diabolical program of a pogrom in Kashmir. The world failed Rwanda after the Holocaust. It failed Srebrenica after Rwanda. Let it not fail Kashmir. There are just too many warnings, too many signs of where this Hindutva project is headed. Let's get to our discussion. But as I said earlier too, we'll play it differently. There's only one question before my guest. Tell the world what you think is happening in illegally occupied and annexed Kashmir. We are joined by Muzammil Thakur, a young Kashmiri activist and director of World Kashmir Freedom Movement. We shall also be shortly joined by Professor Rajiv Kumar, who works at the University of Heidelberg. Mr. Thakur, tell the world what's happening. Why should the world care?
Yeah, if they believe in justice, democracy, and peace, it seems to be that more often than not, unless you have oil, democracy is not important. In the case of Kashmir, we have hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed. And that's just in the last 30, 40 years. If we go back to 1947, since the partition, that itself, we had to more than 250,000 people that were massacred. Now, we know and we recognize that it was the British Empire after its failing and when it created or rather allowed the creation of Pakistan and India, that they made sure that the issue of success and development is going to remain stagnant. And the way they did that was maintaining the issue of Kashmir as a disputed territory and confining the subcontinent into a war zone. And if the world wants to see peace in the subcontinent, if the world wants to see prosperity in the subcontinent, the path is always going to be through Kashmir. We have the issues such as the human rights violations. We have Genocide Watch that issued an alert. We know about the rapes and the victims of torture. We know about the enforced disappearances, the mass graves. I mean, these are crimes against humanity, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and now we're seeing demographic change. And we hear from the world community that these things will never happen again. We talk about Srebrenica, we talk about the Holocaust, we talk about the Rohingya even, and we even talk about Rwanda. And yet, when the people said never again, we're seeing it happen before our very eyes. And it's not just the Hitler ideology that they're inspired by. We saw when it happened with Mussolini and Stalin that the world let it go out of hand for far too long before they intervened. And by then, billions of people had died and disappeared. And in the case of Kashmir, we're seeing exactly the same thing. Now, people may see the last 70 years as something that's tragic, but with the BJP government, sponsored and backed by the RSS, a terrorist organization, we are going to see something even worse in the future.
On this dark day, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of the most populous democracy, goes to the site of the destroyed Babri Mosque and lays the foundation of the Ram Mandir. What kind of messaging is that?
It's abundantly clear that Hindu supremacy is what they aspire for. I mean, we know clearly from the literature, the Nazi literature, as you've mentioned, the supremacist ideology that they have, that they believe in this expansionist program of going beyond their borders of Hindu supremacy, Hindu ideology, and believing that they are the chosen ones, the so-called chosen ones. And this is a problem because unless the international community understands what they're saying, particularly, if I may mention, the OIC, the Islamic and Muslim countries, because the Hindu Rashtra, the Hindutva ideology does not stop at the borders of India. It does not stop at the borders of Pakistan. It does not even stop at the borders of Iran. They believe in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Yemen, in all of these other Muslim countries, that they believe that this is also part of their Hindutva nation, part of their expansionist program. So when Babri Masjid and Article 370-35 is celebrated on the same day, and they try to, I think, if I'm correct, in New York, they try to advertise this.
Yes.
I mean, it's a clear agenda of fascism on the rise under the garb of some kind of Hindu, soft Hindu Sangi. Well, I don't really use that term, but if we understand how the West perceives Hinduism, they've always seen it under the prism of Gandhi. They've always seen it under the prism of some kind of soft protesting against imperialism and fascism. The irony is, it is the same Hinduism, it is the same BJP that killed Gandhi that is now in power, that wants to explore how far they can take their Hinduism, how far they can take their extremism, because we've seen the kind of impunity India have had over the last 70 years when it came to Kashmir, and now we're seeing what they're doing to the minorities inside India, be it with Muslims, be it with Dalits, be it with Christians, or be it with the Sikhs.
Eminent lawyer A.G. Noorani said to his interviewer, with reference to this was just before the launch of Mr. Noorani's latest book on RSS, and he said, well, talking about streamlining the RSS is like, expecting the Catholic Pope to become Protestant. This is something. This is something that inheres in the RSS ideology. But thank you so much. That was Muzammil Thakur speaking with us. I am also joined by, as I said, Professor Rajiv Kumar, who works at the University of Heidelberg. Professor Kumar, thank you for being on the program. Today, I don't have many questions. My simple question or request to my guests is to please tell the world what you think is happening in occupied Kashmir.
I can start it with everything has been happening in Kashmir since 1947. So, but today, like 5th of August, I very well remember 1 year ago, because we were just like it was it would be very mild to say that we were shocked what happened last year, because even one day before, nobody expected that they could go to the extent that they will completely decimate the structure of the state, but they did. And they decimated the structure of the state. They broke it into 2 pieces. And after that, along with that, they put the entire population into incarceration, and which remained for months together, and people did not have access to basic amenities, and people were deprived of communications. But that was just a start, because their real agenda, because I've been writing about this for a long time, their real agenda is transformation of the population. So they plan to carry out what is called as demographic engineering, and they have started on that. After they they changed the status of the state into union territory. So, and with that, what they did was they appointed an inferior officer to become overlord of that place. And since that time, they have been issuing one after another executive orders without a legislative oversight, which is loosening all the rules and regulations that have been played. One of the things what they did was on October 4 last year, was October 5, was to abrogate this Article 35A, which had restricted it was that the citizenship of the Jammu and Kashmir was very restricted, and that rule had been in place since the Dogra rule, and that too was at the instigation of Kashmiri Pandits, who didn't want people from Punjab, from the neighboring province, to come and live in Kashmir. And so last year on August 5, along with Article 370, they removed that also. So which basically, and now they have issued an executive order through which they have changed the conditions under which people can become citizens of the state, and which are very mild conditions. Anybody who has lived in the state for 15 years, or for that matter served in the state for 10 years, they can acquire citizenship of the state, and they acquire right to purchase lands. And so, under that guard, they have issued now citizenships to almost 300,000 people, to the members of armed forces and other thing. So that's there. And at the same time, while they are doing this, so the Kashmiri population, they remain under restrictions. It's a virtual humiliation. What they are doing in Kashmir, they are humiliating the local population. But that humiliation has been going on for a very, very long time.
To sum up, Professor Kumar, what you said, this is a settler colonial project. Is that a good way of describing it?
I actually, in my latest article, I wrote that exact phrase, that their agenda is to turn Kashmir into a settlers' colony. And they are going ahead with full they are going ahead with full steam to achieve that aim. So it's just, and that has been always their aim. And because, as I said earlier also, the earlier governments, they had maintained the charade of autonomy and through Article 370 and Article 35A. But this Modi government, they have no compunction in not following the rules. So because what they did last year on this day, under any, if there were functional courts, this would be termed illegal. But since they have rendered all their courts and all other institutions subservient to Indian government, so there is no hindrance to their agenda.
Thank you. That was Professor Rajiv Kumar speaking with us. We are now joined by the final two guests tonight, Manpreet Singh, who's General Secretary, World Sikh Parliament, and Matthew Snape, who is an editor at Parliament Street. Thank you to both of you. I don't have any questions as such for my guests. I mean, I took a different route tonight, which is essentially to ask my guests to quickly sum up for the world what they think is happening in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. Let's begin with Mr. Manpreet Singh.
Thanks for bringing this topic up, and thanks for inviting me to the show. I think, after COVID, I thought that people will realize the plight of the Kashmiri people, to understand what the lockdown is, to understand what an house arrest is. Now, believe this or not, but 70 years, Kashmir has been more or less been locked down so many times. Obviously, after this last year, single-handed abrogation of Article 370 by the Indian government, unilaterally dealing with this issue in its own accord. And I was amazed at that time why people, especially the countries who, the first world countries who say they are the guardians of the human right and stuff, they were not reacting to this situation. Nobody has in open, apart from a few countries, have come out in open and actually, highlighted this human right violation, what has happened in the north of India, in the region of Kashmir. But I think slowly and slowly, people are realizing what this lockdown is, what this shutdown is. And I am still amazed at the world being immune to this situation in Kashmir. I know all the countries are now dealing with COVID, but I think the things haven't settled down there in Kashmir. The valley is still under suppression, under constant human rights violations from the Indian government, and I think the world still needs to do something about it. And I think the funny thing is, today, exactly after 1 year, today, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is laying down the foundation of the Ram Mandir. We all know what happened to Babri Masjid years ago and what sort of things happened in India after that, how the Muslim genocide began after that. And I think it's really, really strategically important to see why is this happening exactly after 1 year of the abrogation. I think, is this another signal that Modi is giving to the people of India and to the world that this nation is slowly moving towards, and the only Hindu nation, it will be called, on the footsteps of Hindutva, on the footsteps of RSS, on the guided plan of RSS, which wants to convert, basically just burst the Indian myth of secularism and actually declare themselves as a fascist Hindu state. I think they're slowly, steadily moving towards there to finish their plan. But the world needs to recognize the plight of the Kashmiri people and do something about it before it's too late.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Singh, for referring to the Hindutva ideology, which takes its inspiration from Nazi writings and ideologies, fascist ideologies, and this is one of those things. And As a Sikh, you were very familiar with what happened to the Sikh community in Delhi, the pogrom, and earlier the military assault on Golden Temple. But thank you so much. That was Manpreet Singh, General Secretary, World Sikh Parliament, speaking with us. We now go to Mr. Snape here. Mr. Snape, the same question essentially to you. Give us your assessment. Tell the world what you think is happening in occupied Kashmir.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me on this show and for this important conversation as well, which definitely needs to be had. I am deeply alarmed by what's happening in Kashmir at the moment. I think Modi is pushing the situation there too far. He went too far by suspending Article 370, as mentioned earlier, which completely destroys the sovereign rights of the Kashmirian people. And I think the international community does need to get more involved, but I'm not confident that the United Nations could do that. I think the United States is probably the most powerful nation that should be invited into this process. Last year, US President Donald Trump offered to mediate between India and Pakistan in this situation, and unfortunately Modi turned down that invitation. I think Modi needs to stop isolating the international community, and he needs to allow more players to get more involved in this process, because there's just so much happening at the moment. You've got US-Chinese tensions, you've got Brexit happening, and this is an important issue and it can't go away. So I think the international community does need to step up its involvement, if not through the UN, then through the involvement of more democratic countries like the United States.
Thank you so much. That was Matthew Snape speaking with us. This is all from In Focus this week. That's as far as the programs are concerned. But the topic that we discussed today, the issue of Kashmiris' right to self-determination, a right that has continuously been denied to them, is an issue that will go on. And it's up to the world's conscience to actually see the Hindutva project for what it really is. As far as the program is concerned, we shall see you next Monday at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.